I think it's time for us to take a look at what I have in my collection. This is actually a viewer request, and it actually came from a request that I got on one of my live feeds. Somebody asked me, what do you have in your collection now? Actually, I get that question a lot. So let's talk about my Macintoshes. And then I'll do another video for the PCs that I still have. There aren't that many. So in this video, we're going to look at all the Macs I have. We're going to talk about what the condition they're currently in is. A little bit of backstory of where they came from. And see what the specs are. So for our first machine, this is an iBook G4. This particular laptop I got from a teacher. Actually, a lot of my laptops came from teachers that I work with. And when they're ready to retire them, I happily take them off their hands. And because teachers are usually pretty good with their laptops, the ones that I end up keeping are the ones that are in superb condition. I don't waste my time with any laptops or desktops that have physical, cosmetic, or functional issues. I only have room for the best of the best of the best. And that's how I wound up with this G4. So this G4 was used by somebody who kept it on her desk all the time. It never traveled. I don't think it ever left her office. This laptop has had some work done to it over the years. As an Apple certified technician as far back as 2007, I did all the repairs to it early on in my career. If I lift the keyboard on this, back in those days I used to actually write down what I did and when, and we'll take a look. So this one here, I did a hard drive on December 5th of 06 and a CD-ROM drive on April 20th of 07. And it was taken out of service shortly after the CD-ROM drive was replaced. So this one was only in use for, I think it was made in sometime in 05. So it was only really in service for about 2 to 3 years. That's it. And then this person actually got a new one. And this laptop was stuffed in a storage closet and forgotten about afterward. I actually found this laptop in that storage closet, I want to say in 2013, 2014. So it did spend quite a bit of its life in just sitting around in storage. The battery still takes a charge, but it has no cosmetic blemishes really outside of the normal whirl mark scratches that these end up getting. When Apple went to a glossy finish on their machines, they started a trend that just really sucked for anyone who cares about the cosmetic condition of their laptop. This has little tiny scratches. I buffed a lot of them out with motorcycle windshield polish, which really works well. And but there's still some little scuff marks here and there, little scratches here and there. It's nothing serious though. No cracks and no discoloration. I am missing one rubber foot, which I will replace. I just need to find one. The original power supply, I think I have one at work somewhere. So I'm going to use this. This is an aftermarket one. But I have some original ones kicking around. I need to bring one back here. Let's fire it up. Being an iBook G4, it is running, I think it's running Mac OS 10.5.8, which is as high as it'll go. And one of the things I want to mention is because this user generally used a keyboard and mouse, the keyboard is in almost brand new condition, and the trackpad just has very light. I can see from this angle, I can see a little bit of a lighter spot in this area. But condition-wise, they don't usually come any better. And like I said, I only salvage the best of the best of the best of what I can come up with. So let's fire it up and see what we got. You'll notice that this laptop features Apple's magnetic latch. before they switched to basically soft, or what would you call those? The current generation MacBook Pros, MacBooks, MacBook Airs, all of them, they don't use physical latches. In fact, not many manufacturers do use physical latches these days. They rely on either magnetics or hinges that are designed to lock the display shut. Because latches used to get broken. And this is why Apple went to the hidden magnetic latch design. In fact, I'll show you a little bit more of that in a minute. But we're running, 10.5.8. This particular model is a 1.33 gigahertz G4 with 1.25 gigs of RAM. It originally had a 60 gigabyte hard drive, but I think I upgraded that to a bigger one. I'll tell you in a minute. Oops. Get info here. It has... It's not telling me. It's not even telling me the capacity. Well, let's go into the system details and see what the model is, and I'll tell you what it is from there. So if I go to... Where is it? It's not SATA. This is an IDE drive. Where is that? It's not SAS. It's not a printer. Huh. Oh, there. I'm sorry. ATA. Duh. It's got a Western Digital 80 gig hard drive in it. That's what it has. So, definitely not factory. I remember when the drive failed too. I remember doing all the work. It's kind of funny. I can remember that. I don't know why. So the other thing is, I want to share a story about this laptop. Well, this model. So in 2005, Circuit City, CompUSA, Radio Shack, these were all businesses that we would buy electronics from. Nowadays, everybody buys everything from Amazon for some reason. Well, back in 2005, I lived with my cousin. It was my first apartment. I lived with my cousin, and what we would do is, when we were bored, we'd go to these electronics stores and just kind of drool over all the crap we couldn't afford. And this was around the time where CompUSA was starting to push Apple products in their stores. So we went to the local CompUSA on a really snowy winter day where we didn't have to work. And we hopped in his Nissan 4x4. We drove, the 5 or 6 miles to the CompUSA store near us, which, for those of you from New Hampshire, it was the one on Danny Webster Highway near the Pheasant Lane Mall. And we went there and we were looking around, and I'm looking at all these Apple products. Now, at the time, I had thousands of dollars in savings. I could have bought one, and I thought about it, and I'm like, no, I don't need this. And I wasn't really, I was anti-Apple then. I was Apple still had a stigma attached to it in 2005. Nowadays, well, Apple still has something of a stigma attached to their products for their high price and the fact that they're still using older generation hardware in their systems. There's a reason for that, and we won't talk about that right now. I was very anti-Apple, and I was finding flaws in all of their products. So what I used to do with laptops, when I was looking at buying one, for example, I would take the display and I would flex it back and forth, and I would observe chassis flexing, like if the chassis would bow upward in the middle, if I held it down, or if the display bezel would pull away from the LCD. I observed all of those characteristics in the G4, except for maybe chassis flex. And if you grab, and the other thing I'd do is I grab the chassis on both corners, and I would flex it like this. I found that the G4 was very stiff, but the display housing, I wasn't too keen on the flex in the hinge mounting area. I also observed the way the hinges mounted in the middle, there's not a lot of durability on the outer edges of the display housing. So even back then I noticed that the corners of the display here and here would end up being closer to the body of the laptop than it would be here, meaning it's not a completely straight, rigid piece of whatever. that's my story for the G4 iBook. Let's take a look at another one. Sticking with the G4 theme, what we have here is a G4 PowerBook. Now this is a slightly older generation machine than what we just saw. This is from around 2002, possibly 2003. This is the titanium PowerBook. Now this one is in unusually good condition. It does have some cosmetic blemishes, but they're not that serious. These were known for a couple of major flaws. The hinges would snap off here or here. In fact, I had a couple of them that had that flaw at work. The titanium outer shell really wasn't, it was structural for the display housing, but it was really cosmetic for the lower chassis. The lower chassis was largely supported by an internal frame made of magnesium alloy, and the titanium shell was merely cladding on top of a plastic cover that was screwed to that chassis. The problem with the TiBooks is the cladding on the bottom would usually separate from the plastic framework that it attaches to. And you would find that these things would pop off in areas. This one does not have this flaw because this laptop spent most of its life in a storage bag. Yeah, just like that white G4 I showed you, this one had a similar sedentary lifestyle. I'm going to clean it up a little bit. It's got some smudges on it. And another thing, to clean these laptops, I use 2 or 3 different things. I use window cleaner and a microfiber cloth, or alcohol and a magic eraser. Works well on the plastic models. But for the anodized ones, like the TiBooks and the iBooks, aluminum PowerBooks, this works really well. Gives it a nice shine too, and not an unnatural one. So another thing about this one here is the rear door is still intact and still springs back as it's supposed to. This laptop is a fairly early model. I think this is like the second, third version of the TiBook. It has a FireWire 400, Ethernet 10100, 2 USB 1.0 ports, a VGA port, an S-video port, and a modem. 33.6 modem. I know, this should be a 56K modem. Another thing is there's a little bit of a paint chip on the hinge here. This is pretty common. In fact, this one is one of the better examples that I've ever come across. It still has a PCM CAA slot for whatever. And yeah. Another thing that happens is the chassis bezel, or outer frame, which is relatively non-structural, but it is important. These would often crack on the corners. Sometimes they crack in the middle. But almost always you'll find the paint chipping off all around, especially if the laptop was used in a work environment, or college student, high school student, whatever the case may be. The keyboard on this is a nice smoked translucent charcoal, one of the most beautiful keyboards Apple has ever produced, and it's a dream to type on. It really is. This one shows absolutely no wear on any of the keys at all, which is surprising. Like the G4 iBook, you can crack this one open by releasing a little lock in the middle. Just rotate a little set screw in there. You pull these latches towards you and pull up. And here, oops, I must have hit the power switch by accident. You'll see that there's 2 RAM expansion slots. There's the modem module here, and the heatsink is right there. So, yeah, I think I hit the power key by accident. We're going to lock this back down. I'm going to take my little screwdriver, and I'm going to relock it. Now this laptop is actually in a pending sale state. Someone has offered to buy it for me, and we agreed on a price that is pretty reasonable, but this person is still kind of putting the money together to buy it for me. But I'm selling it for very little money. This thing will only get better. This thing will only get more valuable as it gets older. One of the things I want to mention, a lot of these earlier PowerBooks, and iBooks especially, is they would develop a funky odor. Yeah, this one smells like it too. It's almost like feet. They smell like feet. And it's disgusting, but it's unfortunately, there's no way around it. What happens is the materials that were used in the keyboard construction, they tend to outgas. When they're new, when these were new, they smelled like, they almost had like a perfume smell to them. It was a really, really nice smell, in fact. But as they get older, and I think it's the adhesives that actually do this, but they tend to outgas this noxious odor. This one's not so bad. I've had some that were just horrendous, but I usually find that the iBook G3s have that problem. Alright, spec-wise, what are we looking at here? We have the 550 G4, 1 gig of RAM, and let's see. The battery has a whopping 49 cycle counts. That is practically new, but that does not mean this battery will last. Unfortunately, age has more of a toll on a battery's life than cycle counts in some cases. Hard drive size on this one, and I believe this is the factory drive on this. It's got a Fujitsu 20 gig hard drive in it, and I believe it is factory. We're running Mac OS 10.4.11 on this one. It'll run 10.5, but not very well. I'd bump up the RAM to make it. Yeah, I'd probably bump it up to like 2. I think it'll take 2 gigs of RAM. It may not, but I don't remember what the maximum RAM is on this one. I have to look it up. But so that's the G4 iBook. And again, these did not age well. These laptops would degrade to almost hideous status after just a couple months of use because they did not travel well. They were very fragile. So finding one in even this condition is pretty hard. It's not impossible, but it's pretty hard. And I want to mention I was running it off the battery there. So, all right, let's take a look at our next laptop. Now this one here, I received from its original owner. She was a teacher, and this laptop is in pristine, absolutely pristine condition. This one right here is the tail end of the PowerPC era for the PowerBook line. This is an aluminum PowerBook, not a scratch in sight, not a dent, not a chip. You really, 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 really don't find them in this condition these days, unless they were purchased and never opened. I mean, it is even the chrome coating on the latch button here is still there. It's discolored a little bit, but it's still intact. So I'm going to power it up. The battery is dead. And before we do that, let's take a look around. So we've got USB 1.0, or no, it could be USB 2. It might be 2. We've got FireWire 400, FireWire 800, 10100, possibly gigabit Ethernet. S-Video, this is DVI. We still have that PCM-CIA slot. We've got a modem. We've got another USB port. Of course, sound in, sound out, and power. This one here, I don't really ever plan on doing anything with. I'm going to just save it. I'm going to hang on to it. Someday it might be worth something. But that will be in a very near and very distant future. So this model, I know these came in there was a 12-inch, oops, 12 or a 13-inch version. I think it was a 12-inch. Yeah, they came in a 12-inch, a 15, and I believe they even had a 17-inch model, which was just super massive. This is the 15-inch version, and it is absolutely gorgeous. It has the optional backlight, which was a more expensive model. This came with or without a backlight. Of course, I don't have the lineup chart of what was available when, so I could be overlapping here. But I do know this was a more expensive version. One of the things about these, which is why they don't age so nicely, is the keyboard is a transparent plastic that has been painted with a silver paint. And what happens to these keyboards is the paint would chip or scratch off. It would also wear off. And it would reveal a clear plastic underneath. Now when you have the backlight on, you can imagine what that looks like. It just light everywhere. And it's quite distracting. So the other thing that happens to these is there's usually, if you look in the front, where that latch is, let's try that again. Right here, this would bend outward. This cladding here, it would bend right out. Just like the iBook, the aluminum is largely a cladding over a magnesium alloy frame. And unlike the titanium, the aluminum dents and scratches much. Actually, it dents easier, but I don't think it scratches as easy. I think the problem with the titanium ones is that the anodized coating would chip off rather than scratch. That's what I've usually found. It's powered up. Working with a lot of teachers really has given me the opportunity to obtain some of the coolest and most pristine examples of early Apple systems. And this is one such example. Oh yeah, another thing that these G4s are plagued with, and in a lot of these problems, the cosmetic issues carried well into the MacBook Pro generations, early MacBook Pros, until they went to the unibody chassis. But there would be wear marks all over the display from where it would rub against the keyboard, and it was like a twofold issue. So the friction damage to the keyboard would cause this is a metallic paint. It would cause it to wear off. So you've got keycaps wearing into the display, which would scratch the polarizer on the display permanently and wear the paint off the keys. It was like a double whammy of cosmetic wear and tear. These were also prone to logic board failures and a few other problems, depending on the exact time of manufacture, because Apple did change the G4 PowerBook, the aluminum PowerBook, many times over the run of its life. So let's take a look at what it has for specs. We've got 10.4.11 running on it now. It'll run 10.5 with ease. It's a 1.5 gigahertz PowerPC G4 with 512 megs of RAM. Now, I did plan on upgrading this one to maybe a gig or two, or whatever the maximum it'll take. I just haven't done it yet. This one is completely factory. I did a hard drive on this. I say completely factory, then I renege what I just said. I replaced the hard drive on this one for the original owner a while back. I think I put like a 100 gig in there. Let's see what it is. You'll notice that a lot of the, yeah, it's a 250. It's got a 250 gig hard drive in it that it doesn't need, but it has it, because why not? The common theme here is a lot of these laptops I had serviced for the original owners at some point, and they would offer them to me if I wanted them. And that's one way to get vintage computers. People ask me, where do you get your stuff? Where do you get your computers? 3 places. Either the original owners, the dump, or savers. Some of my earlier systems I actually got from work. And these are systems that were being thrown away years ago, back when we were really fast and loose about our disposal policy. We didn't really have one. So anything that was slated for trash, anyone could take, and I would grab the best examples of what was being thrown away, and I would squirrel them away, and that's where I got some of my systems. But the ones that I'm showing you here and now, these largely came from teachers or other people. So this one, again, this is in the best condition of almost any laptop I currently own, and I credit the original owner for making that a possibility. So I even have the original charger for it that's in perfect condition. I mean, you just don't find them like this anymore. Let's take a look at our next victim. Now what we have here is a good example of a second generation iBook. After they dropped the clamshell case, it looked more like it looked like an actual clamshell, and they would come in, you know, fruit themed colors like tangerine and blueberry, etc. Which I'm actually looking at buying one of those again. I used to have one. I've had a couple of them, and I don't have one now, and I think I should probably get one and preserve it, but nevertheless. These are not as collectible because they just aren't that unique. Apple, and it's funny, so Apple realized that by designing the iBook in such a unique way, they really pigeonholed their target market into the educational younger crowd, educational use, kids, younger people who aren't that self-conscious about what their laptop looks like. Not only that, but the original iBook was not only one of the most durable consumer products you could buy back then. It really, to this day, I think the original iBook is probably one of the most durable laptops ever produced. Aside from the Panasonic Toughbooks and other military-grade machines. But it was incredibly durable. It was also very expensive to make, and it also, because of its unique shape and size, wasn't really a good candidate for travelers. It was... I really need to buy one of these things. But it wasn't really good for airline travel, for example, because it was so bulky. So Apple decided to streamline their entry-level laptops into what we now know as the Snow White, or whatever you want to call them. More of a traditional layout iBook. Now the one we saw earlier was the 14-inch iBook from a much later generation, but this is one of the first of the normalized iBooks. Now this one here features, I believe they called it polycarbonate, but I'm not sure if that really is what it is. But the shell of this thing was made of transparent plastic, not translucent, transparent, meaning that it was like you could see through it like a window. What they would then do in the production line is they would spray paint it from the inside, which gave it a really unique depth effect to the finish. So what you're looking through is you're actually seeing right through the plastic onto the paint that's below it. This was a very unique way of building a laptop, and I think this is unique to this generation of iBook. Even the battery was built that way. You'll notice, though, that they discolor at a different rate. The battery did not discolor as much as the shell of the laptop. And as far as I know, this battery is possibly original. There's a lot of scratching on this one, which is very common. This can be buffed out. If you really want to, you can buff this out. It takes a little bit of work, but I'm not doing it. And they would scratch right on this edge here. But this one, again, is another example, a very fine example of an original G3 second generation iBook. And when Apple came out with this design, I think I was in, because I remember the original one came out when I was in 9th grade, I think. And these came out shortly after. I think I might have been in 11th grade at the time. And at that point, I was like, I might consider buying one of those. Like, it was nice looking enough to where I would have considered owning one myself. Opening it up. Now this is what separates the first version over the second or third generation. Let me rephrase that. This is how you can tell whether you have a first generation white iBook or a second generation iBook. You can tell by the logo. This is the original iBook logo. I'll bring it up closer to the camera. So this is the original iBook logo in that early Apple font. And these were painted on the inside. These had a silver paint on the trackpad area, or the wrist pad area, the whole top shell, in fact, was painted silver on these. The display bezel was molded in a white finish. Yeah, kind of like an off-white, a little, not really an off-white, but like platinum white, I think it was. It was more, yeah, about platinum white. And the keyboards were clear or translucent plastic. Translucent, for those of you who don't know, and I'm not patronizing, translucent means light passes through it, but you can't really see through it like a window. You know, I'll get a better look at this keyboard so you can see the condition it's in. It's a translucent textured keyboard with a white polymer layer below it. And like the PowerBook G4, the titanium PowerBook G4, and the other iBooks as well, including the first generation, you can open this keyboard to reveal your wireless, your airport card, and if you pull this airport card tray off, a couple of screws, that's how you upgrade the memory. And you can even replace the keyboard that way. Originally, this was a 500 megahertz G3, 128 megs of RAM, and a 10 gig hard drive with a DVD drive. This was not the cheapest model. It might have been at the time this particular one was made. Again, I do not have the chart of what model does what, but there was a version of this, I believe, that had a CD-ROM only, not even a CD-RW, and that was the Ultra Base built for education model, if I'm not mistaken. So ports, let's take a look. We've got, all on one side, by the way, we've got, this is a, I forget what this adapter was called. It might have been like a VGA adapter. Anyway, but I think, what was this called? DisplayPort? No, there was a name for it. I can't think of it right now. 2 USB ports. These are probably 1.0. We've got FireWire, modem, and Ethernet. And you'll notice that the Ethernet and modem jacks are molded in a plastic that is not coated or anything. This is molded in color, and it is discoloring. Retro Bright would fix that, but it would also destroy everything we hold dear. So we're not going to touch that. Plug in our power. Now, the first generation iBook used a larger version of that port, or that power adapter, as did the, I think it was the G3 Wall Street and Lombard, Pismo, that era of G3 PowerBooks used those as well. So let's turn this on. There it goes. This one hasn't been turned on in a long time. I don't recall the last time I powered it up. But what I'm going to do when I'm done filming, I'm going to be charging all of these to kind of get that battery exercised. But this is one of my favorite iBooks, the absolute favorite being the first generation clamshell iBooks, because they are so unique. But they're actually getting pretty valuable. These, like I said earlier, are not really worth a whole lot. Not yet, anyway. There's just not a lot of nostalgia for this version of the iBook. But the earlier ones, absolutely. They're worth stupid money these days. People are paying stupid money. Whether they're worth it or not is up to interpretation. Yeah, it fires right up. And of course, all of these have dead batteries. This one did actually have, unlike the first generation iBook, these did have a clock battery. The first generation iBook did not have a clock battery. It depended on the main battery to keep system settings set. And this one actually connected to Xfinity Wi-Fi. Really? I wonder if it'll work. Let's see. I doubt it. It automatically connected to an Xfinity Wi-Fi screen. It could not open page. Yeah, no shit. Alright. What do we got here? We've got macOS 10.3. 640 megs of RAM. And it should have the original 10 gig hard drive in it. I bet it does. Let's see. 10 gig Toshiba. No, yeah, 10 gig Toshiba. Wow. What's the battery cycle count? Does it tell me? No, these did not have that ability. Apparently there is no battery, but the battery is present. But yeah, these didn't have the ability to. These didn't have smart batteries in them. Wow. Now this one, I think I loaded a guitar lesson program on it, and I don't think I did much else with it. And this one, I believe, has a tray load. Yeah, this was the last of the tray loaders for the Mac, for the iBook. After this generation, after they went to the molded in color models, when they stopped painting the keyboard top cases, they went to a tray load design. In fact, they did the tray load. They went to a slot load design, which they carried over throughout the entire product line, except for maybe some of the Mac, Power Mac series. But they all went to a slot load. But this is what the early tray loaders looked like on the Apple products. But the first generation, the second generation, those all had tray loaders. I think it was the third generation where they went slot load, and that was around the time they did the iMacs as well. So yeah. So anyway, this is what I got for Apple laptops. Let's take a look at some other stuff. So what I have here, oh, you all know what this is. I've had this laptop for now 12 years. I've had this for 12 years. This is my beloved PowerBook 170. This laptop is one of my favorite, one of my prized collection pieces. This laptop has been restored with the parts of 100 PowerBooks. I scoured all ends of the planet to put this one together. The display housing itself, this is one of the weakest points of this particular product line, and it affects the 140 all the way up to the 185, I think, is when they stop these. And what would happen is the the hinges would, through fatigue and stress, would break free from the housing. There's 4 molded in brass bosses, which are basically a term used for an attachment point that is molded and pressed into the plastic at the time of manufacture. And what would happen is the plastic around these threaded inserts would stress crack, and then it would shear off. And it plagued these laptops. But I found 3 brand new, old stock display housings from now I believe a defunct Apple service center. And I bought all 3 of them. I sold 2 of them and I used 1. I made a profit on them because I'm just that much of an opportunist. And hey, you would too, if you could. This one here has one problem that there's nothing I can do about. There's absolutely not a thing I can do. This one has a 2.5-inch SCSI hard drive that I believe it's either this one or the 165 that I have. Yes, I have another one of these. One of them has the degraded rubber bumper problem that would require a complete disassembly of the hard drive to fix. And the symptom is when you fire it up or shut it down, you'll hear a grinding sound. That's what happens when the head arm assembly strikes the spinning spindle. And technically it doesn't affect the operation of the drive, but over time it could produce metal shavings that could render the drive dead. Disassembling the hard drive is not something that I am capable of doing in a way that will allow it to function again. I've tried. I took a drive that was dead and I tried doing it and it did not end well. Now, another version of that drive has the rubber bumper in an accessible location. Not this particular drive. It's the Quantum Go Drive LPS, I believe. And you have to pull the platters out of the drive to get to it. It just cannot really be done. I mean, without proper equipment and a proper facility. So let's fire this one up. Now this one, again, this was one that I got from work. And it was left by the previous technician under his bench. This one did not have the door on the back. This is actually an accessory door that I found on a junk version of one of these, one that wasn't repairable. This is the power door. This solves some of the problems that plagued was the root cause of door loss on these. People would just rip the doors off because to get the power switch, you would have to open the door, reach back there, press the switch, and then close the door. Otherwise, the door would break off. To plug in a modem, you would have to open the door, plug in your modem, and hopefully the door doesn't break off. This power door was made by the Avo company of Palo Alto, California, and is one of the most unique accessories. One of the only ones I've ever seen, in fact, for one of these. Now this laptop has flip-down feet, which are still intact. There are no cracks or blemishes, really, of any kind, except for this ID number for the, the organization it came from, which will come off with a little bit of love. But it's in really good shape. But there are a lot of laptops in this one laptop. It took me years to get this all put together. And now we're going to see it fail. I actually did replace the clock battery in this. It has a rechargeable coin cell that is soldered to the intermediate connect or the interconnect board underneath the display. So it's got a new battery, a new display housing as of maybe 7 or 8 years ago. So it's probably dead by now. Let's listen. See if she still runs. Come on. Come on, drive. Here it goes. Okay, so this drive here, I don't know if you heard that power-up sound. This one does not have the grinding problem that my 165 has. This one spun up really nice and smoothly. That is pretty good. It does have one other problem that affects the 170s because of these active matrix displays, which were, by the way, the preferred display in this time period. They tend to develop dark corners. And that is a problem that is caused by, as far as I understand, a bonding or seal failure between the layers of the LCD panel itself. And it's more prevalent on humid days. What happens is humidity and moisture can wick into the display and cause these pixels on the corners here to turn black. And it usually occurs after the laptop is running for a certain length of time. There's really no way to prevent it. But this one still shows nice and bright. This is actually really good. And it's more obvious the longer it runs. But for simple display purposes, this laptop is a prime example of what these laptops ran like when they were new. The hard drive has been replaced about 3 times in this laptop, and the one I have in there now came out of a PowerBook Duo, possibly a Duo 230. And I'll tell you what it is in just a sec here. This is it's an 80 meg on disk, but that's not the size. I think this is a 160. I'm pretty sure it's a 160 or a 120. Yeah, it is actually bigger than that. It's a 200, probably about a 250 meg drive, which is massive in 1993 when this was made. But the drive is from about 94 or so. I did upgrade the RAM on this one. It's got is it 8 megs? No, it's got 8 megs in it. 8 megs of RAM. Originally, this one had about 4 megs installed. And it has my favorite pointing device, the trackball. These are such a pleasure to use, but unfortunately, because laptops had to be made thinner and cheaper, trackballs were largely faded away, and you really can't, I mean, nobody's going to build a laptop with a trackball now. But I think we're running Mac OS 7.1, and let's see, general controls. I'm going to change the pattern here. I can already tell you that it looks like the clock battery is dead. Did I look at the time on this one? Yeah, the clock battery in this is now completely dead. But it can recharge, and we'll see about that. I'm going to let this one run for a little while and see if the clock battery wakes back up again. Replacing the clock battery is a bit of a chore. You have to disassemble the laptop, and you have to remove the interconnect board. And the battery is soldered to the board. It also requires a special rechargeable battery that you won't be able to find really anywhere local. You'll have to order it from an electronic supply store, as I did. And that's my PowerBook 170, and that concludes our kind of tour of my Macintosh laptop collection as it sits today. I don't have any other. I have one other laptop that is a Mac. It's a 165. But we're not going to bother showing it right now because it's in another location. So, in our next video, we're going to take a look at my Mac desktops. And because I have so few of those, I'm going to combine my Apple IIs as well into that same video. And after that, we're going to take a look at my PC laptop collection. So stay tuned. It's coming your way. Be patient. Thank you.